Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. I wanted to share some thoughts as I'm processing some of my purchasing decisions, one purchasing decision in particular in the past, and that is the purchase of my Xbox Series X, which I made back in 2021, and had some reasons at the time for making that purchase, a lot of different factors involved. But I'm thinking that maybe the straw that broke the camel's back was an illegitimate one for me to allow to break that camel's back. And I'll kind of explain what I mean. First, this really started coming to mind as I used Game Pass to play Redfall. Originally, I was planning on doing a review for Redfall. I saw some of the early reviews that were coming out, and the thumbnails were saying, already bad, terrible, a mess, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, how much of this is hyperbole? I watched a couple and I was like, ooh, okay. I started into it myself, and I actually still had a very open mind because, for those of you who don't know, even though their Saints Row reboot game got blasted by many reviewers, I had a good time with it. I didn't think it was this awesome game, but I thought it was good, and I enjoyed it. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll have that kind of experience this time with Redfall. I'll just briefly share a few thoughts on Redfall. I'm not doing a review of Redfall because I only played about 30 minutes or less, and I didn't want to add to the stink on the internet about it. We don't need more of that these days. But the main things for me, I wasn't wanting an Arcane game. I wasn't expecting an Arcane game. Arcane is the studio that made it, and they made Prey and Dishonored 1 and 2 and Deathloop and stuff. And some people that are frustrated seem to have been expecting something along those lines. I can understand that, but the devs themselves said, think more Far Cry. That's more of our inspiration this time around. I'm like, okay, supernatural game, like full-on supernatural, and with a Far Cry kind of gameplay framework, I'm totally down for that kind of experience. Let's see what they got. And really what turned me off to make it effectively unplayable for me, or intolerable maybe I should say for me, was that they were lacking waypoints sometimes for where to go once I got out of the opening area, and there's no labeled locations on the map that I could find. And so just something as simple as the first mission saying go to the firehouse, I'm like, okay, is that the firehouse? It's not labeled on the map. I don't have a waypoint. Where am I supposed to go? You do kind of get funneled there, but I was like, if this is a taste of things to come, I'm not interested. But the big thing that turned me off was, although it says in the menus it has aim assist, I couldn't tell that it did at all. And so I need generous aim assist in first-person shooters, not zero aim assist, as seemed to be the case here. That was what took me out of the game Outriders, which did have at least a little bit of detectable aim assist. But this one, I was like, I just suck too bad without aim assist, so I'm unfortunately out. But anyway, this was, an exclusive that was supposed to, I think in a lot of fans' minds, justify the purchase of Bethesda as a publisher, and justify maybe their purchase of an Xbox Series X or S. I purchased my Series X back in 2021, and it was already my second of the next-gen consoles. The first time I've ever owned both of mainline consoles at the same time. I had been saving up for many years and dropped my comic book collecting, which really paved the way for that. And I had, probably about 6 months prior to that, got a PS5. In part, even that choice was made so that I could hand down my PS4 to my boys. I'm really not normally an early adopter, but there was just enough kind of factors involved in both the choice to get a PS5 when I did and Series X, that I ended up pulling the trigger. At the time, it had just been announced that Starfield was going to be exclusive to Xbox consoles. And I think at the time, if I remember correctly, there was good reason to believe that Obsidian games were also going to be exclusive going forward to Xbox consoles. So basically all of Western RPGs. And that is probably my favorite subcategory of games. Used to be JRPGs, of course, back in the day, but Western RPGs, certainly open world, Western-inspired RPGs, that's just totally my thing. And so I really really sensed that I would be eventually heading primarily in an Xbox direction if that's the way things were going to go, and that's certainly the way things seem to go. And then, COVID really messed things up in terms of distribution pipelines, and we didn't know kind of what to expect. There was all kinds of crazy shortages back in 2020 and 2021 that continued into part of 2022, if memory serves. And so, yeah, I was thinking to myself, well, I don't need to play Starfield on day one. It would be hard to not. It would definitely be hard to not play it on day one. It would be hard to wait for a while and just not even play it within the launch window. So I was kind of wrestling with that. I thought that I was probably willing to let go, but I wasn't sure. And then there was this aspect of me creating content in my work and ministry, and I was like, well, I would like to make content for that game during its release window. And so that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back. But I think it might have been an illegitimate one. And I'll come back to that thought in a minute. I want to talk through my regret of purchasing an Xbox Series X at this point. First, going through the pros, the things that I have enjoyed that I've been glad to have a Series X for. I didn't have an Xbox One, and so some of these pros are also things that Xbox One owners could have or could right now enjoy, but that I couldn't. I just went 360 to PS4 without getting Xbox One. So there were some exclusives that I enjoyed, like the upgrade to the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, which is a 360 game. I think that upgrade might also work on the One. I'm not sure, but like 4K, I think it was up-res to no new textures, but the textures really come through much better. And 60 frames per second. It's just a really beautiful upgraded experience for that game that's free. There was a frame rate upgrade for Fallout New Vegas that I enjoyed to a lesser degree. The Oblivion upgrade, I put more hours into that than any other kind of upgraded game that I'll mention here. There were some Fallout 4 mods that were exclusive to the Xbox console. The Diablo-style game Grim Dawn, I've enjoyed, probably about 10 hours of that. It didn't really suck me in. None of these things are really like major game changers. The Mad Max 60 FPS upgrade that still hasn't been made available on the PlayStation 5 was, really got me back into that game for a good while. Maybe even longer than Oblivion, I'm not sure. So these were all nice things that I'm glad to be able to enjoy that are a result of having an Xbox Series X during this time frame that I have. None of them justify purchasing the console itself in my mind in terms of the money that I put into it. They just kind of lessen the sting and are kind of like nice things as long as I have this console, I think that there has been some value in having the Xbox Series X as someone who's reviewing games, because I can leverage Game Pass as an inexpensive way to review some games. And there's also the additional console option when I'm requesting a game review code that I have both a PS5 and an Xbox Series X. And, if they would prefer to give me one console over the other, they can choose. And so that, might have played a role in some cases in me being able to get a review code. I honestly don't know. Again, these are not things that justify the console purchase for me. They just kind of lessen the sting a little bit. I think it's also been nice for it to offset wear and tear on my PS5, since my PS5 is not, 100% my exclusive current gen console, but it really offsets the wear and tear in a limited way. It hasn't come close to getting equal playtime with my PS5, despite really trying to get games for it. Every time I was like, okay, can I play this on the Series X? Like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, yes I can. Okay, I'll buy it on that. Because I might put tons of hours into that. I can give my PS5 a break, and then in theory, my PS5 will have a longer lifespan, But that hasn't worked out like I had hoped. Even for many games that I could buy on either system, there is still a tendency for me to get it on the PlayStation, on the PS5. And you might think, well, why? Why is that? And I've asked myself that as well. And I realized, oh my gosh, there are these other factors that are keeping me in the PlayStation ecosystem more often than in the Xbox ecosystem. Number one, the PlayStation Store just has better sales. They tend to have deeper discounts. They tend to have more games included in their sales, at least more games than I'm interested in. They seem to have them more sales more frequently. So I feel like when I'm buying games, especially ones that aren't new, because I do like waiting for sales, then the PlayStation ecosystem has just been better for me. And I do like to own games. You could say, well, what about Game Pass? Da, 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 da. I just like to own my games. I don't want a timer ticking down after which it's going to be taken off of Game Pass who knows when, and I have this unknown amount of time to finish my enjoyment of this game, So the better sales. The second reason is that I can share a number of games with my boys on PlayStation 4. I handed down my PlayStation 4 to them, and there are a number of games that when you buy them, if I buy the PS4 version, certainly, but sometimes when you buy them, they'll come with both the PS5 and the PS4 version. In either case, I can have the PS4 still registered as a secondary console of mine, and I can install games on there for my boys to play. So that's been, a pull to keep me tethered to the PlayStation ecosystem. And number three, and this one, you might have a different perspective on this, and that's totally understandable. This one is gonna be, very subjective, but I think at the end of the day, I'm getting better choices, better products, and better services from Sony, which is really weird for me to say out loud because, Phil Spencer, when he took over Xbox during a really rough time when it was kind of being run by a guy who came from the business world who clearly did not seem to be himself much of a gamer, and just made some public statements that were just really strongly disliked and hurt the image of the Xbox brand and its relationship to fans. Phil Spencer comes on. He comes from the world of game making, clearly a gamer himself, and so he had lots of nerd credit up front. But over time, I think he has increasingly employed PR speak just like anybody else in the corporate world, and that has given false impressions. I can't read the man's mind, so I'm not going to call him a liar. Other people can do that if they want. I don't want to really enter into that. But in any case, I feel like his words have given a different impression than what the truth is. And the exclusives that have come during his time running Xbox have been pretty hit or miss with fans. Most of them miss with me because they're just not my type of game to begin with. But I mean, of those who are in the market for those types of games, they've been very inconsistently received and rough. Jim Ryan, the head of PlayStation, has, I think, gotten a lot of crap in the world of commentators because he's clearly a businessman and clearly not a gamer in the sense that we think of gamer, And so he's been an easy target as an obvious non-gamer and a businessman. But PlayStation continues to be the most appealing console and selling far more than Xbox. And its exclusives that come out, even though, again, they're not all for me, are getting reviewed much better, being received much better by fans and critics alike. And, well, at least critics. I actually don't know the data on sales and stuff with fans. But so anyway, yeah, it surprises me to say that I find myself connecting with just the overall choices that are happening in the PlayStation side of things than the Xbox side of things. So what are the cons of? Yeah, that's right. Those were pros theoretically that I was that I was going through, but I was just briefly explaining what has put me in more often in the PlayStation ecosystem. So cons. Well, there have been, like I said, the exclusives have been rough. Halo Infinite, I think I've heard that some good things about that, but also some ideas of it being unfinished and, not glowingly received. Hi-Fi Rush was a kind of an indie game from, I believe, Tango Gameworks that was really well received by critics and I think by gamers as well. But it's, it's a kind of an indie game or a lower profile game, not the big AAA kind of thing that really sells consoles. Same is true with Pentiment from Obsidian, and a well-received game, but not a big budget game, not one that's going to sell Xboxes. Redfall was a game that was maybe supposed to sell some Xboxes, and it's come out and it's a kind of a mess apparently at launch. And really, the situation with the exclusives is huge because that's essentially my entire reason for purchasing a console. When I make that decision, is like, well, what's going to give me access to the things that I actually want to play. So what's been going on with the exclusives has been disappointing. To be clear now, I'm not. I know I probably sound kind of low energy. Maybe I seem kind of sad. I'm just kind of subdued and low energy at the moment. But I was not banking on Redfall. I didn't have my hopes up for Redfall. I was just like, oh, this could be cool. If not, hey, I just finally pulled the trigger on what's it called, Ghostwire Tokyo. And I'm ready to get back into that. I've already played some of it and having a great time. So that's my supernatural Far Cry. I'm good, But just in general, what we've been seeing happening, I think a lot of gamers would say is disappointing. In fact, that's probably putting it lightly for a lot of gamers, especially if you basically have a budget to get one of these consoles and that's it. And you choose Xbox and you're running into these kinds of disappointments, then that can be really, really frustrating. And in some content earlier this week, I talked a little bit about, how maybe that can be a red flag for us. Say, okay, if I'm getting angry about my entertainment, then maybe something's going on that's worth evaluating in my mind, in my heart, in some of my choices and my outlook. And so you can look at the video that I posted earlier this week to kind of address the issue of anger when choices in our entertainment kind of ruin things for us. Let's see here, other cons. The exclusives that do appeal to me have been delayed significantly, and they may still be bad. That's occurring to me more and more as I see the various exclusives come out and the different delays happening. Starfield, of course, I would love for that to be great, and I have reason to think that it will be great. It's not super duper what I want. What I want is Elder Scrolls, I don't really need Fallout in space or whatever this is going to be. I think I'll probably really enjoy it because it's just the skeleton of Bethesda open world games, just with a different setting and stuff. And I like space and sci-fi well enough that I'll have a great time just because I love those types of games mechanically and their design. But I'm not chomping at the bit exactly to play Starfield. I'm just looking forward to it. But it could be bad. Avowed, which Obsidian is working on, that looks like it's going to be a Skyrim-like. Who knows when that's coming out? And it also could end up being bad. We don't know. Outer Worlds 2. Who knows? I really enjoyed Outer Worlds. Outer Worlds 2 could be bad. And who knows when it's coming out. And Elder Scrolls 6, I don't know. I'm even wondering, is that going to come out during this console generation? And if it does, will it be so close to the overlap period that it'll just be better to get it on the next console, anyway? Fable, I'm mildly interested in. I've never finished any of the previous Fable games, but it's an open world fantasy RPG. Maybe they'll do some fresh things with it this time around. But in any case, these are all theoretically in the future, but I don't think we realized around 2020, 2021, even in 2022, I think that it's becoming much more of an undeniable realization now. But I don't think until now, I at least realized just how much COVID had destabilized release dates and quality of games. Now, you might say, oh, we can't just blame it on COVID. That's fine. But without COVID, we couldn't blame it on COVID. And so if there's something else going on behind the scenes and people are just blaming it on COVID, well, they see COVID then as something they can blame it on. And so it's giving them some wiggle room to whatever, drop the ball or whatever. All I'm saying is something happened that I think it leaves the industry in a different place, and I think it undoubtedly has some significant connection to COVID. And so we've got all these destabilized release dates. It is so much more common than it used to be, even for games to be delayed, for them to be launched in a crappy state and kind of fixed as after release, maybe to hopefully some degree, but. And there are also plenty of consoles now. We've got, at the time when I bought my Series X, the supply issue was really, significant. But there was also the rumor that Starfield was maybe going to come out in 2021, so that was a significant part of my purchase at that time. Well, we saw how that went, and we also see how the scarcity issue has gone away effectively now. So I really could have waited had I, known more. And I think what I had going on in me was FOMO, fear of missing out, disguised as legitimate work/ministry factors. I was even unsure at the time. I was on the fence, but like I said, there was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I said to myself, and I believed it was the case, that, it would be good for me to just do this now, so that I could, make content around this if this is a huge... I even imagine maybe doing like a playthrough series or something, which isn't out of the question now still, but but I think that there was some FOMO that I was labeling incorrectly and thinking of it as this legitimate concern for ministry and work factors. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys as just kind of a recognition that sometimes our own desires, we can disguise them as things that are holy or good or responsible or right. You guys know that. I know that. I guess I just wanted to share this as an example of that with you so that you can join me in just being all the more on guard for the tendency for that to happen in us. And you might think, well, what's wrong with FOMO? And I gave some thought to that. What's wrong with the fear of missing out? I think you could probably come up with some kind of an exception to this, but I'll just say as a general rule, FOMO basically amounts to loving the world and the things of the world, which 1 John 2:15 instructs us not to do. In the ESV, 1 John 2:15 says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." Well, why is that? Why is FOMO loving the things of the world? Well, when referring to things, this word for love here is agape love, and when referring to things specifically, it means to prize it, to prize something above other things, to be unwilling to abandon it or do without it. To be unwilling to do without it. I was ultimately unwilling to do without the experience of playing Starfield during its release window. I believe that tipped the scales, inched me over to trigger my purchase at the particular time that I did. And the love of the Father was not in me as I did that. That doesn't mean I wasn't loved by the Father, of the Father in this case, when it says the love of the Father is not in him. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. It doesn't mean not loved by the Father. Of the Father in this case means for the Father. In loving a thing of the world, I was excluding love of God the Father. Because in the choice between getting what I wanted and handling my money in the careful and wise way God teaches us to, I chose trying to get what I wanted. Because I did not want to do without it. I loved this thing of the world. And I think I've learned from that. I've always been distrusting of corporations, but even more distrusting of corporations speak now. Not just because I think they might be lying, but because I think, guys, you are so unstable right now. You cannot tell us what's going to happen tomorrow. So I think that's going to help me, but it still comes down to an issue of my heart. So we'll see what happens when Starfield comes out. And I wonder, for someone in my particular position, I wonder if it's if it possibly makes the most sense for me, if it is possibly the most godly and responsible thing for me to never buy games without renting or demoing them first. Because if I'm renting it, then I use Spirit Blade Productions money for that, and so that would be a responsible, conservative usage of my own money. But then again, is that being selfish and leveraging, this pot over here to keep me from spending my fun money? I don't know. I wrestle with that. I think I've been done with pre-orders for years now. I might also be done with day one purchases, but I don't want to spend Spirit Blade Productions money unnecessarily either. I don't know. I'm still going to continue wrestling through this one, and I know that my situation is fairly particular. So really in sharing this with you guys, my hope is that by articulating some of my struggles and self-evaluation, even though my situation is different from yours, hopefully just the process of thinking through this with me has maybe triggered something worthwhile for you, or a way of thinking maybe that's going to be valuable to you as you evaluate your own habits and thoughts, and hopefully endeavor with me in redoubling our efforts to not love the things of the world and to really live with open hands given over to the things that God wants us to prioritize.